Hello everyone, welcome to the Races, War and Everything. We're back after taking a week off. I am sorry for that. I don't have any excuse other than I'm busy and I can't manage my time properly. But
maybe beaten with a fucking stick.
Yes, and you figured out it's Nolsey and Fenian bringing the show today from the city that autumn forgot, Perth. And while we may have missed a week, I think we've got a very good show and we'll catch up on a lot of the stuff that's been going on in the past 2 weeks.
We fucking perfectly timed that week off because how much retarded shit happened in that interim space there.
Yeah. That's why I say, this is one of those shows where, my prep is short, and the reason why is because I don't need anything written down. I've read so much about all of these big incidents and that have happened in the past couple of weeks that I can just kind of riff on it all. So, So the first one we're going to get into is, the whole Bruce Lehrmann debacle, what ended very, very badly for him, the man who allegedly raped Brittany Higgins. And remember, that is still an allegation because this is not proof that he raped Brittany Higgins. For that to occur, you need to have a verdict in a criminal trial. And what we had here was not a verdict in a criminal trial. It was a civil trial, and it was decided on the balance of probabilities, meaning that it was not decided on guilt beyond reasonable doubt, which, of course, is the criminal standard of proof that you must meet. So he brought
Unless you're one of us.
Right. So look, basically what he did, he brought an action against Channel 10 and Lisa Wilkinson, who of course was the main journalist involved in airing the allegations, and said that he was easily identifiable as a result of that interview alone. And look, that's true. People knew straight away. Even though his name wasn't coming through in mainstream media, you could just Google Brittany Higgins rape suspect and find him. And I remember that's how I found him and how I found out that he was actually put into a psychiatric institution for a little while because the whole thing was literally sending him nuts, as it would. But as it stands now, the civil court has decided that on the balance of probabilities, he did actually rape Brittany Higgins. So this is obviously bad news for him.
We need to collapse the rape superposition.
The what?
The rape superposition.
What does that mean?
Electron probabilities, and you have to observe them to see if they are or are not in a state.
Oh, okay. Well, look,
it's a science joke.
I thought it might have been, yeah. So look, yeah, there's no point in glossing over how bad this is for Lehrmann himself, because remember, he took on Channel 10 and all their expensive lawyers like Sooth Christenthal, very, very high-priced lawyers, who charge over $1,000 an hour in some cases. And he's going to be ordered to perhaps not pay all of those costs, but a significant amount of them. And I assume that he would have to declare himself bankrupt after that, because we're talking about a legal bill in excess of $1 million, easily.
Oh yeah, easy.
Yeah, so he's screwed. And also, obviously what he did backfired on him. This was an attempt to clear his name, and it has actually just further smeared his name. So, no point.
It's kind of completely mind-boggling that you could be in a situation like this, especially with all the side information that we've been covering, I guess, since early last year?
Yeah.
Whereas the book deals, whether it was literally leaked text messages conspiring with journalists, to make this a big story, and then, or whether it was the, habitual gambling addict in the background rubbing his hands together as he drives off to the casino.
And we'll definitely talk about him as well. Because, look, let's remember that there were actually two main issues at play here. One was whether or not, of course, did Bruce Lehrmann rape Brittany Higgins on that night in Parliament House. But the second one which didn't seem to be talked about as much, anywhere near as much, was the idea that the Federal Liberal Party engaged in a kind of political cover-up to ensure that those allegations never reached the media. So those were the two issues that Judge Michael Lee took on. And he actually even made the point that if you watch the original Project interview with Brittany Higgins, the main thrust of the interview is not that she was raped, but the allegation that it was covered up, that there was a political maneuvering that went on to ensure that this could be kept behind closed doors, or in the Canberra bubble, as they like to call it. Now, very important to state here that while he may have said, okay, he believes that Bruce Lehrmann raped her, he also said that there was absolutely not a shred of evidence that there was any kind of political cover-up whatsoever. He was very critical of Channel 10 over that, of Lisa Wilkinson, of the media at large for playing into it and not asking the right questions. And of course, how could I forget? He was also extremely critical of Brittany Higgins' partner, David Shiraz, who, as we've been saying, is sort of like the faceless man in this whole endeavor. He was the one where you mentioned the leaked text messages. Those text messages, part of them said, I've got connections to top people in the Labor Party. And there he was specifically talking about Katie Gallagher. So he knew Katie Gallagher back when she was Chief Minister of the ACT, and he was a journalist in the press gallery back then. And they formed a friendship. And lo and behold, Katie Gallagher was the one who led the charge in the Senate against Linda Reynolds with those allegations. And then, of course, she had Penny Wong backing her up as well.
Hey, but that's just a coincidence, even though that he basically fucking admitted it whole cloth in a text message.
Right. So he actually, David Shiraz, that is featured very prominently in the statement that the judge gave, which was 324 pages long, I believe. I guess in a trial like that, it has to be that detailed, though.
Yeah.
And he said that, what was very interesting was that, barely anyone wanted to take notice of David Shiraz and to take into account the actions that he was taking throughout the whole ordeal to kind of figure out what motivations were. And he absolutely said that David Shiraz's motivations were political. He wanted to use it as a way of destroying the Liberal Party. Not only that, but of course they were doing it for personal gain as well. $2.45 million payout, remember, Brittany Higgins got from the Commonwealth government. So worth to point that out, that it's not entirely that one side is taking L's here, all right?
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of position is sort of damaged in some respect in terms of what the judge said. Now, actually, I should say that there's two people here who actually come out, you could say, either unscathed or vindicated in a way. One of them is Fiona Brown. Fiona Brown was Linda Reynolds' chief of staff back when these incidents happened. And she was sort of fingered as the one foremost responsible for orchestrating the behind-the-scenes cover-up. For example, there was something said about her ordering that the ministerial suite be immediately cleaned so that, any evidence of a rape could be destroyed in the process. And of course, that turned out
Are we sure that's not
good.
because? Are we sure that's not because Brittany Higgins probably puked all over the fucking couch?
It could well have been that. I'd also hasten to point out that, in Parliament House, cleaners clean the house every day, as in the whole building, every day, every room.
Imagine the smell.
Right. Most offices have cleaners that go through on a daily basis, like when people knock off, so...
Yeah, dude, all the way down to retail stores, man. Although they do a shit job.
So the idea that was some sort of a cover-up is just an absolute joke. But also, the other person who came out, you could say, well here, was the relevant minister, Linda Reynolds herself. And This is particularly good news for her, I think, because remember, her case against Brittany Higgins and David Shiraz is still pending, and that's being fought out here in Perth. Now, the judge did say that when it came to the testimony and the evidence of both Brittany Higgins and Bruce Lehrmann, that he had trouble with the credibility of both of them. Okay? He said that they are both unreliable witnesses. He said that while he doesn't believe they're pathological liars, that they would make up things as they went along if they thought it was beneficial to them. Now, in the case of Bruce Lehrmann,
there is reason to lie. There is motivation to lie here.
Oh, of course. But look, I mean, for example, I still don't think Bruce Lehrmann did it, okay? My position on that has not changed. But I think that he did tell some lies, and I think that he made some tactical errors, you could say. One of them, and this was, I think, the stupidest one of all, was that he said he didn't think Brittany Higgins was drunk. I mean, come on. We've all seen the footage of her where she can't walk, she can't even get her shoes on. And then she
goes to a security gate and literally loses all motor control.
Right. And he was with her in 2 venues where he saw her consume multiple drinks. So the idea that he thought that, she was just a bit tipsy or something, that I don't believe him for a second. And that was part of the problem, was that he did sort of think he should tactically lie here and there, but then those tactical lies backfired on him, one of the reasons being is just because they were just so obviously made up, like that one.
I mean, if he just stuck to his guns and the truth, even then, dude, this is just a fucking tar and feathering, to be honest.
It is.
It shouldn't have fucking worked. It shouldn't have fucking worked, but it fucking did.
In the case of Brittany Higgins, though, it's much more blatant. I mean, she originally said that she went to hospital over it. That wasn't true. She originally said that she, what was it? Oh, yeah, the dress or whatever was brought to a laundromat or something to clean out. That wasn't true. She also said that, she also apparently stole an expensive designer labeled jacket from Linda Reynolds' suite and lied about that. What was the other one I was thinking of? The bruise on her arm. Without any timestamps or anything, and emerging supposedly from a phone where all the data had been wiped, there was evidence of the injuries she sustained during the rape by a bruise on her arm, much like what happened in America with that Breitbart. I can't remember the name that's involved now. Corey Lewandowski was involved in it. So on the whole, she could not be trusted. The judge said this. Now that is going to have an enormous bearing. We'd have to believe on the current action that Linda Reynolds is taking against her and David Shiraz. So this, I think, really puts Linda Reynolds in strategically in a good place, and I think that she'll end up winning against her. What else? There was one thought at the front of my mind, and then it just escapes me. Well, look.
Was a thought, how the fuck did we get into this retarded situation? Because that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Oh, wait, yes. No, that was the other thing. It's also been referred to, do you remember the NAC? This is the National Anti-Corruption Commission, so the federal ICAC. As I said before, Brittany Higgins received a $2.45 million payout from the Commonwealth. And that payout was given after 1 day of mediation and with no response from the relevant parties, in this case, Linda Reynolds and Michaelia Cash. Right, because she got a payout from 2 different departments, because she worked for 2 different departments. And the payout was not just because of the rape, but also because of what she said was bullying and harassment in the workplace. And what evidence has she actually released to show that? Absolutely none. And basically what happened was Mark Dreyfus, the Attorney General, the Jewish Attorney General, said, if you go in there and defend yourself, that is Ministers Linda Reynolds and Michaelia Cash, if you go in there to this mediation session and defend yourself, the Commonwealth will not pay your legal bills. So he threatened them straight out. That's basically extortion. And it worked, though. And so then she gets that payout. So much of what that was based on was statements that she made that Judge Michael Lee went on to say were actually lies. So there is definitely now a case to be made that she should not have been made that compensation payout. And not just that, but apparently there are powers that exist to make her pay the money back. So, no, Brittany Higgins did not emerge from this as all victorious. There are some bad things in here for her. In terms of like reputation, I guess she's had some saved, but it looks like this is financially actually going to cost her a lot. Now, Lisa Wilkinson and Channel 10 were also going out saying that this was a huge win for them, for Channel 10, and a massive loss for Bruce Lehrmann. Well, at the same time, Judge Michael Lee accused Channel 10 and Linda Reynolds of basically being involved in their own sort of conspiracy against the Liberal Party. Okay? Because they're the ones who hopped on board and said this was a political cover-up by the Liberal Party to stop damage ensuing. And Judge Michael Lee said, no, that's not true. And you jumped on this bandwagon, peddled that lie. So anyone who actually looks at this objectively should not be saying that Lisa Wilkinson and Channel 10 came out squeaky clean with no reputational damage whatsoever. I just don't buy that at all. This was actually quite damning against them. Now, Bruce Lehrmann, of course, said nothing when he did the walk of shame outside the court. He has yet to say whether or not he will appeal the decision. I'm guessing probably not, because, that would be kind of tripling down, and, it may not work may not work for him. And by the way,
willing to get your balls paddled again.
Yeah. But okay, no, the other thing I was going to say without on all of this is that just in regards to the judge saying that it's his conclusion that Bruce Lehrmann did rape Brittany Higgins, I've really got to stress this. Well, two main things to stress. One I already mentioned, which is this is balance of probabilities. It's like you have to pick one, and which one do you think is the more likely? He is not convinced without a shadow of a doubt. So, if he were the judge in a criminal trial, it would be a not guilty verdict. But the other point is that when you look at how he kind of connected the dots here, like what made him think that non-consensual sex actually ended up occurring at Parliament House at the end of that night, he very much based it on the testimony of one witness. Now, I'm sorry I forget this woman's name, but she was one of the political staffers who was out on the piss with them all night. Like, first at a pub, I think, and then second at a nightclub. The one that they ended up at the end of the night. Anyway, she said that she saw Bruce Lehrmann and Brittany Higgins kissing in a booth, or passionately kissing, I think was the way she worded it. I must point out that she was the only one who gave that testimony. Not even Brittany Higgins herself says that she had intimate contact with Bruce Lehrmann that night. Okay? Not even her herself. Yet, Judge Michael Lee jumped on that and said, because of the fact that they were intimate beforehand, he must have then wanted to take it a step further by bringing her back to Parliament House, where he could get her into a secluded private area and have his way then. He then went on to say that he believed he was indifferent as to whether or not it was going to be consensual or not. Now, on that part, he didn't really connect the dots. He didn't say, he didn't explain how his mentality was that of a rapist at that point in time. At least from the excerpts, I haven't read the whole 324 pages, of course, but from the excerpts I read, he didn't connect those dots. He simply just said, he was intimate with her, and therefore that would have led into something else later on. And he based all of that on one witness whose testimony does not even line up with Brittany Higgins' testimony. So I got to say, on that basis, it's extremely flimsy. And I dare say that, he reached quite a conclusion here with a blind leap. And it just doesn't add up to me.
The rape mindset.
Yeah, I'd maybe
I'm
make
on that rape mindset.
Yeah, but he did say that was his mindset, but he never explained like how or why. At least I was not convinced of that when I read the judgment.
Bro, there's like one girl said that you're like kissing her, so like you're like definitely raped her, bro.
Yeah, which is bloody stupid. I mean, this happens a lot. Like, you might make out with some girl and that's it. It's not like every guy has to make it his absolute mission, like if he gets to first base, that he must get the home run every night, every time. That's not the way it works. So I don't know if he's going by his own mentality or something. Like, is that maybe the way he would think?
You see a lot of projection when it comes to these kinds of topics as well. Like anytime you get like one of these kinds of topics, like women and etc. and like blah blah blah, and you get the fucking dude who is like literally just the most violent person in the entire fucking world towards women, projecting it on other men, i.e. the male feminist.
Yeah, it could well have been. And look, I have not backgrounded Judge Michael Lee here. Don't believe he's Jewish. But I would be interested to see like what other kind of decisions he's made before, to kind of see if there's...
Because it's a big fucking leap.
Yeah. Yeah, and, also I would just say that, wouldn't be surprising that people like Knowlesy and I don't have a hell of a lot of faith in the Australian justice system, because this is the same system that found George Pell guilty twice, for example. So, I have every reason to be skeptical about the conclusion that the judge came to. But yeah, we'll definitely keep watching the current defamation against Brittany Higgins and David Shiraz, of course, being followed by Linda Reynolds. And this deals directly with the idea that there was a cover-up. And so if Michael Lee's conclusion is any indication of where this is going to go, Linda Reynolds is going to win this, and she'll definitely get a, reasonable payout as a result. Okay, any last words on that before we move on to the stabbings that we've had?
Don't be a drunk whore.
Yeah, in conclusion. And, if something does happen to you, go to the police first, not the media. All right. Let's get on to the stabbings here. So, Bondi.
Brown or gay? Okay, gay. We're doing gay.
Yeah, we're doing the gay one, yeah. And, well, okay. You kind of stole my line here. But, yeah, this guy, 40 years old, Joel Couchy, I don't know how you say his name. Apparently some loner originally from Queensland recently moved to New South Wales.
People saying schizophrenic, but I haven't got a good source on it.
On what?
People saying he was like diagnosed with schizophrenia, but dude, that was from Twitter, and Twitter was a fucking nightmare when this fucking thing happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I read that as well, and that apparently he was off his meds, and I guess, yeah, some schizophrenics perhaps can go on a violent rampage when they're off their meds. I don't know. But what was funny at the time? Well, not funny, but, when I saw this, I thought, I reckon it's an Arab, because when it comes to those kind of incidents in Australia, anyway, we usually don't have issues with guns, but we do have issues with knives. There have been knife attacks by Muslims on Australian police officers before. There just hasn't really gotten that much coverage. So yeah, I thought this was. I just kind of thought, this is an Arab, and if not, maybe it's some psycho Sudanese or something. So of course, lefty Twitter and everything says, "Ha ha, white supremacists." Like, see. He was actually a white guy the whole time, like while he was saying this.
I don't even think that the fucking white supremacists on Twitter were saying it was a Jewish dude. It was
Well,
a fucking.
Bondi.
I was like fucking like Zionist
Bondi is,
Jews saying I was an Arab.
well, Bondi is in the seat of Wentworth, right? Bondi
Yeah.
is eastern Sydney. It's not western Sydney. So this is one of the affluent areas of Sydney. Malcolm Turnbull's old electorate and the highest Jewish population in Australia. More Jews live in that electorate than any other. So, but that was also what made me think maybe this is an Arab. Like maybe he was,
Yeah.
targeting a Jewish area. Although, he would be a bit more targeted and go to a synagogue perhaps rather than, just randomly at a shopping center. But yeah, one of the things about this guy, okay, yes, white guy, that's true. But he was also a poofter. In fact,
Yes.
he had an escorts profile up on escorts.au. And
How much does a
if you're a
stock price?
male if you're a male escort, right, like under whatever circumstances, you're a gay escort. You're not getting women paying you that money. Okay, women don't pay for sex, men do. And he had this up. I'll read out actually how he described himself. Athletic, good-looking 39-year-old guy, offering dozens of closed-door services. Let me gently
Okay.
massage all your body and have me in any and every way. I can do groups,
Yay.
romantic, or anything you desire. Just let me know anything you need. I hope no one isolates that, but that's what he had written on his profile.
Someone please isolate that.
So, if I can do a clap back and like kind of throw it back in their faces, it's like, look, every time there is something like this happening, it's either some racial minority or it's someone with like severe mental problems and social problems. It's, people from groups where we're always told are totally normal and totally psychologically sound, or at least no less than the average person. Yet gays always actually manage to commit a horrific amount of crime. Gays are overrepresented in just about every form of crime. You know why the whole thing about being raped in the ass in American jails, like where that comes from? It comes from the amount of homosexuals in jail. Okay?
Comes a man of
And
brothers on the down low.
yeah, and blacks are more likely to be gay as well, statistically, which explains that part
Well,
of it.
the thing is, the problem is if you actually stick that statement with someone you're arguing with, they just turn around and then there's some like fucking Rube Goldberg machine why that's your fault. You having that opinion causes this.
Yeah. And I got to point out, like, I read the story about him being an escort on the Australian, and I read it nowhere else. Certainly the ABC, the Guardian, and they did not want to touch this at all.
Oh fuck no.
They just want to really, really emphasize that this was apparently a schizophrenic off his meds, and that was it. Like, they didn't want to say anything more than that. And that he was not a Muslim or a racial minority. But yeah, go to the Family Research Institute. Unfortunately, it's the website they don't really keep up to date, but there is some really good stuff there if you want to get sort of fun but gruesome facts on homosexuals in terms of what the average homosexual gets up to and how much more likely they are to engage in deviant, violent, and criminal behavior. And you might be surprised how much it is. Okay. So we'll move on to the church stabbing. So this happened again in New South Wales, in the suburb of Wakeley. This was at an Assyrian Orthodox church. I believe this happened also at an Orthodox church that had just gone its own way, like it was its own ministry or whatever it is you call it. They had been excommunicated from like the larger Assyrian Orthodox church in Australia.
Because of the certain person's eccentricities.
Yeah, so the guy who got stabbed, the bishop, I actually watched a couple of his videos last night. What is it, like Mari Emmanuel? Weird name. So he was originally born in Iraq. He came as a small child to Australia, and he is part of the Assyrian minority. This is like I've heard some people say that they're basically like white people in the Middle East. I don't know about that. Like they don't. He doesn't look white to me. I'll just say. Maybe he's like less brown or less Arabic or whatever than other Iraqis, but yeah, I don't know.
It's a mestizo type situation here, buddy.
Probably. I
best.
mean, because I know Yazidi Christians, some of them are white. That's definitely true. You see them like some of them got red hair, blue eyes, and that. I'm not so sure about the Assyrians. Maybe like originally, because they're obviously a religious group as well. Maybe originally they were kind of much more white.
Like founding stock was a bit more Mediterranean.
Yeah. So anyway, this guy had a following. I was surprised to see that he's actually, some of his videos have racked up tens of thousands of views. And actually, the reason why we have video footage of the stabbing taking place is because they were actually doing a live stream to YouTube at the time. So
you should have just been a VTuber. Got himself an anime girl profile.
Yeah. All right. So why did this guy have a following, and why was his church excommunicated? Well, because he said some naughty things.
He's pretty based.
He's called homosexuality a sin. He said that it's against the laws of nature. He also said, there's a video, it's called Debunking Islam in 7 Minutes. So, yeah, he does go after Islam and Muslims. And he also goes after Judaism. You can watch a video where it starts off with a clip from the Joe Rogan show where Ben Shapiro is talking about his opinion on the historical Jesus and how Jews don't accept him as the Messiah. And he goes on to say that the Jews are mistaken on that. So, of course, he's just going after them from a completely theological point of view. But that's enough.
Yep.
That will stir controversy. Whether or not you're
occasionally will. I remember seeing the first time I ever saw that, he had these kinds of opinions, which I believe was like a fucking Daily Mail article or some shit. One of those fucking rags, anyway. And it was just like, fucking, this dude was stabbed, and read between the lines, here's why he deserved it.
Yeah, and I also wanted, to take this opportunity to say, this is why I'm still, I'm against Israel in the Middle East in terms of the current conflict in Gaza, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm pro-Palestinian or pro-Muslim or pro-Arab. Okay, like, will I take their side, for the sake of convenience or
as long as you're making the right people mad?
Yeah, I mean, look, you could say there's an element of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Sure, I don't mind that. I see that as a reasonable position to take.
The enemy of my enemy is stinky.
But what I'm saying is, no, I don't want Arabs here. And yes, they are much more likely to go and do something like this. This guy was clearly being targeted for his religious views and his critique of Islam because, well, he was an extremist. Everyone around him said that this kid had been radicalized by watching extremist Islamic material, whatever you want to call that. Apparently, he was into ISIS. And that kind of thing.
I was looking at all of this stuff, and some people were bouncing around those like the hashtag AFP on Twitter, and some people were posting stuff. And again, treat Twitter like Wikipedia back when you're in high school, not a reliable source. But they were saying like it was known to the AFP and like had been talking to the AFP. Yeah, well known and etc. So it was just
they said he was known but not well known. Was the way they were.
Yeah. People were saying that there was they had communications back and forth with them. So people were putting like 2 and 2 together and being like, oh fuck, did they pull like trying to groom a Down syndrome kid because apparently he had like an IQ of 71.
Oh, Yeah, well, I mean, they did do that with an autistic kid. Remember that? Like, they basically
Yes.
the cops, like, egged him on, and then go and arrest him after that. It was blatant entrapment. Um, but yeah, I mean, look, apparently this kid did have some like minor charges or convictions before, which is why they say he was known to police but not well known. He was apparently on a good behavior bond for possessing knives. So, yeah, it was. Cops definitely had an idea that this kid liked knives and was certainly at risk of using one, which he did on two people, because there was a 39-year-old guy in the crowd there. He was just joining the service who intervened, and he got stabbed as well. Then eventually other members of the crowd were able to pin him down until police
And
arrived.
apparently cut his fucking fingers off.
Well, I read that there were injuries to his fingers, but I didn't hear that they were cut off.
Yeah, I saw a picture on Telegram, and the carpet seems to match up, and it's a dude with like fucking like stub fingers, and then what looks to be like the same kind of like out the top fucking folding knife thing.
Wow. Well, if they were trying to make it so that he couldn't carry a knife, they probably succeeded.
Well,
That's one way to do it.
again, this priest was very fucking lucky that like out of the top fucking knife didn't deploy when he actually went in, because you can see in the video he actually pauses for a hot second to look at the knife, and you can see that there's nothing extending out from his fist.
Oh, I haven't actually watched the footage. I mean, I know that.
Well, you're not allowed to post it in fucking social media. The fucking
Well, the East Safety Commission has like issued like what is effectively a takedown order, and as usual, they're saying that Twitter is the one social media platform that is not doing everything they can to remove every trace of the video. Apparently, Facebook has been compliant, but not Twitter.
yeah, again, you can always find this shit on fucking Telegram.
Yeah, look, I'm sure if I wanted to, I could find it, but yeah, I don't know.
It's
The
not
gore
really
porn
worth it.
doesn't really interest me that much, to be honest. But look, something else that happened here was when the police turned up, a riot actually broke out. This was pretty crazy. So, all up, they said that there were 51 police officers who were injured as a result. And so far, I think they've only arrested one person who was a 19-year-old guy. And also, they trashed a number of police vehicles. And the police are now saying that they can't adequately respond to 000 calls at the moment because so many of their cars are either inoperable or they're going through repair at the moment because of what happened there. So it was full on. It was, yeah. And, something I was trying to find when I was reading through all of this was like, what side were the rioters on, or were there opposing factions within the riot? Like, I couldn't quite work it out. Like, were they pro-Christian or were they pro-Muslim or what was happening?
I thought they were trying to get inside to fucking kill the dude.
Might have been that as well. Obviously, a hell of a lot of people wanted blood at that point. But look,
yes,
you go to the Australian, and they're writing a lot about ancient hatreds kind of coming to the forefront, saying that, this is because we have Islamic extremist problem in Australia. And that's true to a large extent. But I'd also just say that this isn't just religion here. This was like an Arabic thing going on. This was like intra-Arabic conflict, of which, that definitely exists. Like conflict between Sunnis and Shia, between Yazidi Christians and, in this case,
everyone else.
Christians, yeah. And, it's just yet another example of one of those types of ethnic conflict that exists in one part of the world simply being transplanted to another via immigration. And
I mean, how many times have we fucking said this, people?
Yeah. No magic dirt in Australia. None. Okay? Those same ethnic conflicts are going to look exactly the same, and end in the same kind of way that we see here. So, expect more of this.
It's like when those damn dirty Scots come over here and they start beating on other Scots people.
Yeah, I mean, remember the days when the Scottish and the Irish, or the Wogs, were the problem? Oh, how
fucking
I wish
Hazel on days.
Okay. All right, so moving on to immigration. We have yet more figures for you, and it's great news. No, it's not. We have figures for February of 2024. Now, apparently, we had a monthly record of over 100,000 arrivals. Now, when you look at the amount of departures that also occurred, in other words, net migration, the figure for February was 89,740, which, yet again, for net migration, is a monthly record. We have never, ever had net immigration so high in Australia as what we did in February. And, good luck reducing those numbers in March, April of this year when we finally get figures on those. So, again, of course,
what about the cultural enrichment? On Monday, I saw my first street shitting.
Well, I mean,
I'm not joking,
putting
by the way.
Aside, can we remember that it is now official Labor Party policy to cut immigration? And they've been actually telling us this since December of 2023. They said that net migration by the end of 2025 would have been halved. This year, we're supposed to head towards a 25% reduction, meaning that we would go from the supposed figure we had for 2023 for immigration was 500,000. I think it was much more than that. But nonetheless, they want to take it from 500,000 to 375,000 before the end of 2024. How the fuck are they going to do that when February alone was almost 90,000 people net? So look, the coalition is rightly seizing on this, saying that the targets involved here are just a joke. How on earth are you actually going to meet any of these targets that they've set when you have net immigration so high? And really, as I pointed out before, the only kind of visa class that has been slowed a bit is students. That's it. Every other type of visa you can imagine, they're just coming in.
Ramp the fuck up.
At the same, well, no, not at the same rates, at slightly higher rates all the time. It's always slightly increasing.
Yeah. There's only fucking one practical solution, and that's just to fucking stand at the gates of an airport with a fucking well, I won't continue that line of thought. Basically just turn back the fucking planes.
Yes, and please focus on planes instead of boats as well. We'd be a lot better off if that were the case. Now, we actually have the case going on right now. I love these legal codes that they use, but the man at the center of this case is known as ASF 17. So he's an Iranian man who's actually been in immigration detention before. What?
Was it that his initials Abdul Safir Faruqi or some shit? ASF?
I don't know. To me, that sounds like an assault rifle or something. I don't know how they get those codes, how they derive them. But so look, he's saying, although his story has just sort of changed a lot since he's been here, which by the way was 10 years ago. He's been in immigration detention, I believe, for almost a decade.
Oh, and they're saying they couldn't deport him earlier because he wasn't cooperating. Dude, go to his house, arrest him, fucking tie him up, and put him on a fucking plane.
Yeah, I know, but to be fair, that's actually the laws that they're trying to pass at the moment. So yeah, this guy has not been cooperating with all of the attempts to deport him back to Iran. he's claiming that he'll face persecution because this is what he says, that he's bisexual, a Kurd, and converted to Christianity. So
basically, he's ticked every single box that like NGO pamphlets give them.
Look, the Iranian government does not persecute you if you're a member of any one of those groups. It must be noted. Will you face like discrimination and perhaps harassment by the greater society? Yeah, probably.
You should.
But the Iranian government does not persecute members of those minorities. Like homosexual sex is outlawed, but you have to be caught doing it for it to actually happen. And name me a Middle Eastern country besides Israel where that isn't a crime. These acts still in about half the jurisdictions of the world are still illegal. I got to stress that. And it wasn't all that long ago that Europe, America, Australia outlawed sodomy as well. Anyway, I'm getting on a tangent here. But look, they're watching this very nervously because it's estimated that if the High Court finds in this Iranian man's favor, that will actually mean that approximately 200 immigration detainees will be set free. It's just like with the other one, where you had a single case of a person who was found that their, indefinite detention was found to be illegal. Therefore, it was illegal for anyone who was on it. So it's the same kind of thing here. Now, the Liberal Party is still calling for Andrew Giles, who was the immigration minister, to be sacked. One of the reasons for this is that something has leaked to the media here. This was a submission made to Home Affairs dated July 8, 2022. It showed that Andrew Giles, it warned him of intractable caseloads of detainees who are not eligible for visas because of criminal convictions and who cannot be removed due to the risk they could face persecution in their home country. So this was actually showed to him all the way back then, nearly 2 years ago. So that is actually relevant for both cases that I mentioned. So even though the government is sort of making legislation now and they're trying to ram it through the Senate, the coalition have obstructed it, of course, and there's a current inquiry into it. The government did not have legislation at the ready for when indefinite detention was made illegal. So considering that the minister was warned about this all the way back then, and also just about the growing number of people and the need to actually get the government involved here to do something about it instead of just letting them fill up the detention centers all the time, he was warned about this well in advance, nearly 2 years ago. So I don't know. Every time I read something like this, it seems like Andrew Giles' position is ever more precarious. So if there is going to be a sacking or a resignation from the Albanese front bench, I'm definitely going to say it's going to be Andrew Giles.
Mm.
Okay, now on those emergency migration laws I mentioned, these are the ones that the coalition actually supported it in the House of Reps. Then it moved to the Senate, and then the coalition decided that they needed to have a Senate inquiry on it. And so that, of course, is what is happening right now. The Greens are saying that, these are draconian, that they have violations of human rights. The coalition is really kind of keeping their cards close to their chest with this one because they don't want to look soft on immigration. And indeed, that is the way that the ALP has tried to attack them. They're trying to accuse them of...
That's where this election has to fucking go.
Did what?
That's the fucking baseline on where this election has to follow, where these upcoming elections have to go. Everyone is fucking talking about it. Everyone's losing their collective shit.
Right, and look, the reason why I think they're so interested in all of this is because these are the high-profile cases. These are the immigrants that the Australian public know about because, you hear about them on the news, you hear about the criminal records that they might have and the danger that they pose to society. But when you add it all up, you're talking about 350 people out of both court cases I mentioned before. That's it. Okay, so not to go on my usual rant about illegal versus legal immigration, this again is just another example of it, of having a phony debate so that we don't talk about the real issue of legal immigration. And that is the way the Liberal Party likes to sell themselves, tough on borders, simply because they're tough on boats. And the Labor Party is now trying to do it in a very similar way by saying, hey, look, see these people here who lie in limbo, in legal limbo, in detention centers. We actually want to pass really, really harsh laws so that we can get them out of the country. Because that's what those laws would do if they were passed. You can actually make it a crime to not cooperate with Australian authorities. And they can also make it compulsory for you to apply for a passport in your home country, for example. And even I was kind of surprised when I read about those laws, read about plans. I thought, wow, for Labor, that's pretty hardcore. But then, I just remind myself, okay, how many people does it apply to? At the moment, 350. Fuck all.
Yeah, but how many fucking minutes does it take for like a pack of Indians to spew through a fucking gate at any one of the airports across this country to meet that number? I'm guessing fucking 3.
Yeah, bloody 350 probably came in during the course of this segment. It's just it's nothing. Okay. So yeah, look.
Planes are a mistake.
Just lastly on the inquiry that's happening at the moment, when they do these Senate inquiries, the public at large is invited to make submissions. I've read through these before, and man, the vast, vast majority of them come from left-wing organizations of some description, like charities or NGOs or think tanks or whatever. They always come from the left. It's amazing. So I remember I read about this when the Medivac inquiry was going on. And holy shit, it was just, it was all like Amnesty International and places like that.
They can't even find left-wing, grassroots support for this shit anymore. I remember, back in the day, you'd be like, oh, my Vietnamese neighbor is well-mannered. I don't care if his fucking daddy sold fucking heroin. You could get, maybe a handful of fucking, a couple hundred people to protest and throw a stink. They can't do that anymore. It's gone.
Yeah.
The only support they have these days is just straight up institutions, whether it be think tanks, NGOs, etc.
Oh yeah, that's right. And people who fund them in the urban elite. That's really it. But, having a look at these submissions though, you got to admit, they do it well. They flex their muscles and they exert their influence very well. And, this is why, the right loses so much of the time. And they'll just say things like, oh, forming a think tank or forming an NGO or whatever, that's for losers. I'm not going to do that. And it's like, well, these people who you call losers are actually having an enormous influence and they're getting things done that they want. You're not. You know why? Because you haven't marched through the institutions like they have. And you write off institutions like academia as just for, egghead losers. Well, those egghead losers are doing a lot of winning.
Yeah, they've lost complete control of the fifth column.
Yes, they have. And well, anyway, look, what I was saying is it's being dominated at the moment, obviously by the left, by human rights lawyers. Are one of the demographics, let's say, giving submissions to all of this, saying that if you look at global conventions of human rights, and what constitutes torture and all these kind of things, they're saying that this bill basically violates all of that. I don't care if it does. I don't give a fuck. I care about the human rights of the Australian white population that's been displaced. That's what I care about.
I'll steal a talking point from the Noticer. Also look up the Noticer. They're also on Twitter and on Telegram. When we hear these talks of like social cohesion, or this bill, is going to bring in social cohesion or advance social cohesion, and they keep bandying about this term, social cohesion. What they actually mean by that is just making it fucking illegal or impossible. And these two fucking little things go hand in hand, because you can't just import a whole bunch of people without there being like racial and ethnic conflict, as we've seen last week. You have to have these bolster laws just to basically make it an oppressive state to even fucking think in any terms close to where we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's so ironic that people accuse, say, guys like me and you of fracturing social cohesion, yet at the same time, they're the ones who support importing differing groups to share the same territory, which is the worst possible way of breaking a social cohesion possible. I don't think it's because of our inflammatory rhetoric that you had that stabbing in Wakely somehow. No.
We don't even say go out and fucking like harass these people, but I was gonna say we don't even say go out and harass these people, but like how many fucking times, like a month, do you see like a clash between fucking Indians and Pakistanis?
Yeah, or Indians and Khalistanis as well. Like the Sikh groups. That's a huge thing. That's really taking off. It's a matter of time till there's a death. Frankly, I'm surprised there hasn't been one yet. There's been some brutal bashings, but there hasn't been a death yet. That's around the corner, I've no doubt. So look, there are actually 3 federal MPs for Labor, that is, who also have problems with these emergency migration laws. You will know who one of them is? Good old Josh Burns, Victorian Jewish candidate, or MP, backbencher. So they're kind of saying that they needed watered down because there's a good chance the coalition won't end up supporting it, and of course then they would have to rely on the Greens in the Senate to push it through. And holy shit, you imagine that, like emergency migration laws that the Greens agree to. There'll be no point in naming it an emergency migration law at that point. It'd be dead in the water.
It'd be fucking useless. It'd be gutless, basically.
Okay, so the last story on immigration is that in terms of one of the shake-ups that is coming, so this is actually a real reform. This is to do with the skill-first migration shake-up, as it's been called. And that just means that when it comes to importing people, we prioritise those with skills that are in short supply in Australia. So there is, the jobs and skills list that goes through a whole bunch of occupations that apparently, we're short of. We don't have enough people to fill those roles in Australia. So if you are a member of one of those occupations, you get priority. Now, employer groups have complained because, well, the following people are not on that list: chefs, cooks, bakers, managers, IT workers, accountants, and hairdressers. So the hospitality section in particular were not happy that chefs, cooks, bakers aren't on that list because they're always complaining about
chefs, cooks, and bakers. Where are my Brazilian slaves? Where are my race mixed slaves?
Right, no, and you want to know why you have problems with that? Is because people in hospitality are treated like shit, like utter shit. I've never worked in it myself, but I've known plenty of people who have.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard stories of like head chefs literally throwing cutlery at people's heads in a kitchen before. Some of the stories are just unreal. And I don't think it's any coincidence that, hospitality is one of the least unionized workforces in the country. And it also has some of the most exploited employees in the country as well. I don't think that is any coincidence whatsoever. So, maybe if you actually treated them well, gave them a little bit more flexibility in their hours, because remember, they're the ones who have to cook for you when you're not working. So, they get stuck with all the evening and weekend work, and also paid them a bit more. Maybe if you did those little things, maybe if you actually did those things,
I
you
could,
could
I could
get.
take a fork being thrown at my head if I was, compensated for it reasonably.
But, those positions will naturally fill themselves, and you won't have to rely on, Brazilian slaves, Guatemalans or whatever, to fill up those spaces for you.
I still love that one fucking meme. And it was like someone saying like it was like a dude doing a tour and he goes into like all these like fancy restaurants in Melbourne. Some like, oh, authentic Chinese cuisine, blah blah blah, and all this stuff. And then it's just like I was like, where are you guys from? Brazil, 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 Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, look, some Brazilians are white, and that's fine. I certainly don't mind taking them in. But no, most of them are probably not. Most of the ones that come here are not. Not the ones I've met anyway. All right, so let's turn to Israel and Gaza. And wow, like Nazbol energy is on the ever increase in the Australian Labor Party, apparently. So you've got Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese forever kind of walking the tightrope, let's say. Andrew Bolt has even accused Penny Wong of sort of running her own independent foreign policy separate to that of Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party. I don't really think that's true. She has come out and said that, a two-state solution is the best way forward to get out of the current conflict in the Middle East. Very controversial statement, especially because even those who are currently pretending that they supported the two-state solution stopped pretending after October 7 and just saying, hey, well, see, once you give them a little bit of freedom, this is what they do with it. So a two-state solution is just unviable. But anyway, Anthony Albanese has not gone and corrected Penny Wong on that and said that, it is not their position. And it's true. It must be pointed out. I don't know if Andrew Bolt takes note of this, but Labor has actually for a very long time been supportive of the two-state solution. You know who else, like the first American president who started seriously talking about a two-state solution? It wasn't Obama. It wasn't Clinton. It was George W. Bush, actually. He was also, yeah. And, I believe he was also the president when they had the withdrawal from Gaza. Remember because there used to be Jewish settlements in Gaza, and they took them out. I mean, then they started just heavily occupying the West Bank, of course. They just took them from one sector and put them in another.
Yeah, they put the little freaks in the freak cage, and occasionally they just go in there with sticks and poke them.
Right. So, of course, what you have, because of all this stuff going on, you effectively have the coalition saying that Labor is not sufficiently pro-Israel and pro-Jewish. It always comes down to that. It's like, you're not doing it hard enough. You need to put more effort into pleasing your Jewish handlers. And how dare you consider those in your Western Sydney electorates, who are Muslims, who are Arabs, and who clearly have taken the other side in this conflict. So Peter Dutton gave this speech where he referred to the protest of October 9 at the Sydney Opera House. And he said that this was like a Port Arthur massacre moment for Anthony Albanese. Did you hear about this? Now, not in terms of... So he wasn't comparing, because obviously no one died on October 9, through these protests. And remember they were chanting, "Where's the Jews?" Not "Gas the Jews." But anyway, the reason why he compared it is because he said that John Howard seized the moment well and, brought the country together during a time of need and healing that was needed after such a violent tragedy. Whereas Anthony Albanese was just sort of missing in action when it came to condemning the October 9 protests.
Wasn't he in... where the fuck was he again? Was he in fucking China or Japan or some shit? Wait, no, that was Min's recently, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, but Anthony Albanese did condemn those protests, though. He did say that, like, you know, we all need to calm down, and, you know, he condemned the ones that then went on to go into Caulfield, like the more densely Jewish populated areas in Victoria and New South Wales. So, like, all of this stuff, you know, that they call on the Labor Party and Albo and Penny Wong to do, they have done it. They are doing it, but they're just not doing it to the sufficient level that that the coalition deems acceptable. And I just see this time and time again. Anyway, since the attack on the aid convoy that left 7 aid workers dead, one of whom was an Australian citizen, there's also been reports of other aid workers who were driving through Gaza trying to obviously deliver aid, and bullets hitting their cars. And this was said to have happened on the 9th of April. And the ABC actually contacted the Israeli Defense Force about this incident, and they have provided no comment. So, you know, this wasn't an isolated incident. This was just happened to be one of the more, you know, hardcore ones because it involved an airstrike, and 7 people, of course, died. In this, no one died, thankfully, despite the fact they came very close to it. Bullets actually hit their car. So this just shows that Israel is still not heeding any calls to pull this back.
Nope. They're just going to prove for their operation in Rafah as well, which is great.
So despite the fact they want to say that this was an accident and that they're very, very sorry about it, bullets are still hitting aid workers' cars in Gaza. That is still happening, and I don't see why it wouldn't. And yeah, you know, as you pointed out, the Rafah ground invasion is coming up very soon. There's no doubt they're going to do it, and it'll happen all over again.
Yep. Was it like airstrike hits your aid convoy? Sorry, fucking shoots up your aid convoy. Accident. Fucking why are you angry?
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I couldn't believe it, but even like Jason Clare said that it's not good enough to just say shit happens, it's a war. And that's right. You can't just give us that and then just, you know, launch your own internal investigation that self-exonerates. That's not good enough. Okay, so turning again to, you know, the apparent like rift, if you want to call it that, between factions in the Labor Party or elements of the Labor Party. Josh Burns, mentioned him again. He's saying that he's trying to negotiate a kind of compromise behind the scenes between the warring factions. He himself is the MP for McNamara, so that is a Victorian electorate that actually covers the suburbs of Caulfield, St Kilda, East, and yes, Balaclava. I love the name of that one. All of whom have comparatively high Jewish populations. So what a surprise that Labor decided to run a Jewish candidate in that seat. But anyway, he's kind of putting his hand up saying, oh, I'm going to be the ultimate mediator here. And I'm going to be the one who gets the left and the right of the party to come together. And I'm sure by that he means he wants to sufficiently scare those on the Palestinian side to start cucking as hard for Israel as Andrew Bolt wants. I don't have any doubt of that.
I was gonna say there's no fucking like manpower on earth to fucking quell that situation without killing one of the parties completely. Like literally, like there's no terms on either side. And that's not me advocating for it, by the way. That's just me looking at the fucking situation and going, these people want to fucking kill each other.
Yeah. Oh, well, you just reminded me, because I don't think I put this in the prep. There was a story I read about, because we're actually only a year away from the next federal election. And apparently Labor are very concerned that they're going to lose seats that have traditionally been red ribbon safe Labor seats in Western Sydney. And the main reason for that was, yes, because of the Arabs, right? So, we saw those scenes with Anna Lee, for example, who was confronted by an Arab Muslim in her electorate, I believe. They are very, very angry at the Labor Party for not being sufficiently pro-Palestine, which again is evidence that, yes, they are trying to walk this tightrope. Now, in Western Sydney, you do actually have, some people don't know this, but a lot of mayors or council members in Western Sydney are Arab Muslims. And a lot of them have, you could perhaps say, like a cult following in their neck of the woods. They have like a big social media presence, for example. A lot of them are considering tilts as independent candidates in the next election. And because of that grassroots support that they've got, that's, a big sign that they could actually get over the line. Not only that, but remember the ethnic politics that played out in the last federal election in Western Sydney. Remember Dai Lee, the one who beat
there we go.
Christina Keneally, as a privileged white woman. In this case, I think that criticism was actually true. Like, it wasn't because she was white; it was just because she's like Labor Party royalty and she's a woman. She was parachuted into the safe seat of, was it Parramatta? Can't remember.
I think Parramatta makes sense.
Yeah, I think it was Parramatta. And, that was seen, at least at the time, that they pre-selected her for the seat as unlosable. Well, then you had Dai Lee, who came from, is she Vietnamese? I can't remember. She's some kind of Southeast Asian. And again, she had that sort of like local, she had that local grassroots following. And she entered the fray in what was termed, sort of framed as the privileged white American woman up against the rags to riches type of refugee who came here with nothing and made something of herself. That's how it was framed. And she won. She took that safe Labor seat away from Labor. So I don't have any doubt that these Arab Muslim candidates or mayors or whatever in Western Sydney would have a very, very good chance of actually taking the seats as independents and taking them from Labor in what is considered Labor heartland, Western Sydney.
I'm showing up to a Western Sydney electorate as an independent dressed up as Hitler.
Wow, okay, well.
Joking, of course. Or am I?
Well, look, Mein Kampf is like the second highest selling book in the Middle East.
Yeah, again, doesn't surprise me. Well, at least I'll know the policies then.
First is the Quran, obviously.
Of course.
But yeah, number 2 is Mein Kampf. All right. Okay, let's move on to Iran. We'll move on to Iran. We're still sort of talking about Israel here, though. So, of course, Iran did launch that airstrike that didn't result in much. Apparently, 90% of the drones and the rockets that were fired from Iran to Israel were taken down.
But Finian, there was a 7-year-old Jewish child that died. So you can just forget about the tens of thousands of Palestinian kids that got fucking mega nuked over the past couple months.
Yeah, well, I mean, the overall death count is 35,000 now, I believe, in Gaza.
Yeah.
It's pretty bloody high. And yeah, I've heard estimates of around 40% of that 35,000 being children. So yeah, it's enormously high. But anyway, this was retaliation for Israel taking out a Syrian embassy an Iranian embassy in Syria, and they killed an Iranian general. So that's obviously why they targeted it. So they promised to retaliate. Some people say that like this is sort of something that Israel just kind of let happen because, you know, like I said, the rockets and the drones were intercepted. Other ones just sort of landed into like an empty airspace. So, you know, it was just sort of like, oh, let the Iranians blow off steam and then we can just kind of let things settle back down again. I don't know. It could be something like that. So I would say that this isn't really going to escalate, at least not for the time being. I don't think the Israelis are going to hit back against them. Albo has condemned this, as of course. He said that the attack is a grave threat to the security of Israel and the entire region. But guess what? The coalition again accused Labor of not providing a strong enough statement in support of Jews and Israel.
Oh, Christ.
Now, Iran has also warned Australia not to interfere in all of this. Well, of course, like they just generally would put that out, like that all other countries should not kind of get on Team Israel here. But it's another question of like, what can the Iranians actually do about it? And the answer is, well, nothing really. And the way like the Australian make this suggestion is that the Iranians can launch cyber attacks on nations like Australia if we get involved.
I don't think the Iranians particularly give a shit about us.
No, they don't. And I mean, we're going to pay lip service to Israel and talk about the evilness of the attack and all that kind of stuff. But we're not actually going to do anything, you know. It's not like we're going to give material support for Israel. That's not going to happen. Okay, what else we got on this? Oh yeah, one other story on Iran, and that is the Israeli government is again putting pressure on the Australian government to declare the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, in other words, the Iranian army, as a terrorist organization. So this is an army of 250,000 people. It seems a bit much to me to name like an army, a standing army of a sovereign nation with 250,000 people, to designate that entire entity as a terrorist organization. That seems a bit much to me. But nonetheless, in light of the new attacks that happened, they're renewing calls for that. And I reckon that, yeah, if we had a coalition in government right now, including if we had Peter Dutton still as Home Affairs Minister, that would happen. They would officially be deemed a terrorist organization. So maybe we're actually getting a taste of what the Labor Party is like when they stand on principles. Or maybe not. I suspect it's just they're trying to, you know, again, walk that tightrope with their Arab Muslim voters.
That's a circle you're not going to be able to fucking square. I'm just going to say that right now.
Okay, let's move on to religious freedom. So we've gone through the Australian Law Reform Commission's report into the state of religious freedom and discrimination in Australia. They called for a section of the Sex Discrimination Act to be abolished completely. That was the section that basically gave religious institutions the right to discriminate. And that meant, you know, they don't have to hire homosexuals, that kind of thing. Then at the same time, they supported a religious discrimination bill, much in the same way as you have a sex discrimination bill, that would like kind of carve out certain religious freedoms. Now, interestingly, one of the lead authors of that report, his name is Stephen Rothman, and look, I couldn't identify whether he echoes or not, but going by his name,
Rothman.
just going by the way he looks, I'm pretty sure he's Jewish. However,
I don't think we need a swab test on this one.
Probably not. But he actually said some good things here. So he basically said that the Law Reform Commission went too far in calling for that section to be abolished from the Sex Discrimination Act. And he said that it would be constrained by the terms of reference that would be set by the Attorney General, who was Mark Dreyfus. So he said also that a positive right proposal, that is like a positive right for religious institutions, would go further in protecting faith institutions than what the government is proposing in a draft bill. So, yeah, he's actually coming out and saying, well, look, if you do abolish that section, you're still going to constrain the power to stop religious institutions from, say, not hiring homosexuals. He basically wants to keep that right for them. And you have members of other religious institutions now. So this came from a large group of people, Catholics, Muslims, Jews, etc., who is now saying that, well, look, the lead author of this report is now basically contradicting the Law Reform Commission's own findings, saying that, no, we do need genuine religious protections here. And they're taking Albanese to task on this and basically saying, okay, you need to bring us back to the table here. We need to oversee the drafting of this bill, and we need to see real religious protections enacted. And I hope they get their way, but I don't know. This is the Labor Party we're talking about here. All right.
Great news, everyone. This country's retarded.
It is. We're about to go through another reason why this country is retarded. More specifically, this is West Australian retardation. Laws are about to be changed here, meaning that you will no longer have to undergo medical or surgical gender reassignment in order to change your sex or gender on a government identity. So like your driver's license, your birth certificate, etc. You can simply provide some form of evidence that you identify as whatever, male, female, or unidentified, X.
Fucking freakazoid.
Yeah. And you don't have to be a post-op tranny anymore in order to do that. And actually, Knowles, you see the link that I've got there? Just click it, the one, if you dare. Like the person who gave the speech and declared victory in all of this was this creature called Danielle Laidley, who is clearly a man, but is what looks like a post-op tranny anyway. Oh, really gets the disgust reaction going. So, yeah. So anyway, how was this?
That's goddamn Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, it's a scary looking figure, gotta say. So look, our Attorney General, he's on his way out though, John Quickly. He said, this is not radical legislation. We're only bringing Western Australia out of the dark ages, up to a level of social reform that the rest of the country already respects and enjoys. Really? I didn't know we were still living in the dark ages here in WA. Just because we said that. I mean, you know what the laws should say? Like, I agree, we do need to reform these laws. They should say that even if you have gone through an operation, that you cannot change your sex. You cannot change your gender. And that, by the way,
we just put you in a sane asylum.
Yeah. And don't expect me to respect your so-called choice over all of this. You may be a highly feminized, fucked up person in the head, but you're still a man. You're a very perverted, demented, feminized man, but you're still a man at the end of the day.
So fucking bring us out of the dark ages. Fucking get fucked. People are gonna like historians in the future are gonna look at this because like it's not like like some grand losing battle. It's just our flavor of it is just has the risk of losing. People are gonna fucking turn around on this, whether it be us or the fucking like brown, incredibly race mixed descendants of the entire fucking world, I guess, and call it the Dark Ages.
Look, if that is the Dark Ages, please bring us further. Suck us into that time vortex. I'd love to. All right, let's move on to the economy. Just a couple of quick stories. Actually, I might just quickly mention, just because I'm thinking of it now, the basically what was an inquiry into Coles and Woolworths in the Senate recently. You had the South African CEO of Woolworths questioned in the he's outgoing as well, by the way. He won't be CEO for much longer. But he was asked about profitability on equity, like return on equity. So, look, I'm not going to bore everyone with economic jargon and whatnot. And to be honest, I'm not even all that sure of it myself. But there are different ways of measuring profitability, like not just on margins. So like if you look at the profit margins of grocery stores, they're usually like between 3 to 5%. They're actually pretty small. But because they sell so much, they still end up bringing in a hell of a lot of money. A company like Apple, for example, has profit margins of about 30%, like way, way higher than what grocery stores have. But anyway, he was questioned by one of the Green senators, I forget which one, but on what is the return on equity? In other words, he wanted to use a different metric or measure of profitability. And then the Woolies CEO refused to answer the question. And he was even at one point warned that he could face jail time or fines for holding the Senate in contempt for his refusal to answer basic, simple questions. So it did get.
I'm not going to answer that question because it will outline my monopoly.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so look, I mean, other ways he defended himself. He said that it's a myth that we have a duopoly in Australia because we have Aldi, we have IGA. He also said that they're increasingly facing competition from even eBay and Amazon as well. And I'm like, but hold on, they're not grocery stores. I don't really get that, I guess for like minor hardware products like batteries and light bulbs and stuff, I guess maybe.
You could probably buy a bag of peanuts off of fucking Amazon, to be honest.
Yeah, probably. So there would be a few things.
You're not buying cut to steak or fucking like microwave meals. You're not buying fucking frozen items or perishables. That's for fucking sure.
Yeah, so, but I mean, you ask the vast majority of people, where do you do your shopping? It's always Coles and Woolies. Always.
Yeah. Unless they're like a business owner, in which case it's fucking Costco.
Yeah. I mean, I know a handful of people who do their shopping at Aldi as well. Okay, now another inquiry that is going on. Well, actually, no, it's the same one, but another company that got the microscope was actually Bunnings. You might be surprised to hear because we just
like our only fucking hardware store.
Right. Yeah. So look, it's sort of Bunnings don't seem to get like the bad rap that Coles and Woolies do, but it has long been known, like if you work in hardware at all, that that Bunnings are corporate bastards. They really are. And like I used to work at as a picker packer for a warehouse that supplied, I think, like roughly 40% of the orders went to Bunnings. And there was some like new shop that was opening. One of Bunnings' like very few competitors, like Mitre 10 or something like that.
Fucking was it Masters or some shit like that? It was like
I can't remember. This was so long ago, man. Like I was very young.
I remember because there was one that opened up like on the other side of the suburb from Bunnings, and it was like open for all of about like 4 months, and then just fucking disappeared.
Yeah, and Bunnings have been very, very good of just elbowing the competition out. But what happened in this case was Bunnings actually threatened the company that I work for. They said, we're not going to buy anything from you anymore if you supply our competitor with, with products. Now, they didn't outright say that. They didn't word it that way because that would be illegal. But, it was absolutely implied.
Read between the lines, fuck knuckle.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, just ask anyone who may have worked at another hardware store or something like that. Like, little by little, Bunnings has just basically created a monopoly in the hardware sector, and also further, like gardening, nurseries and those kind of products generally.
Again, they basically shitted up the entire fucking suburb of Lansdale, because that was like nursery central. Yeah, like a whole bunch of nurseries in Lansdale. And then they just went and fucking shitted it up, and I think there's one left that supplies really fucking spastic plants, and that's the only reason why they're around.
Right. So nursery operators actually fronted this inquiry, and they accused Bunnings of abusing its market power, which led to them being forced into signing unfair contracts and working unfair long hours at not enough pay. I don't have any reason to doubt that. Bunnings is denying it all, of course, and saying that they treat all of their employees and contractors with the utmost respect. I had a little trouble believing them. All right, staying in WA, we're on housing now, and we've got some new laws that just came through. This is concerning the regulation of rental properties in WA. So let me just bring up this story. So I'll just go through the major changes that were done here. One was a rent increase. Laws about rent increases. So the way it used to be was every 6 months, your landlord could increase your lease, charge you higher rent, and they were completely free to do that so long as just every 6 months. Well, now it's got to be every year. And, as we know that, for at least 2 years, every rent increase has not only been an increase, but has been a significant one. So at least slowing down the frequency in which you receive the increase is a small win.
I was actually looking at because obviously I'm selling a house currently, and obviously that housing prices as well just gone through the fucking roof because you got these big conglomerations who are buying to rent them. But even with the increased housing price, I calculated that in about 9 years, you've paid the equivalent in rent for that property as would be the total capital of the house.
Okay.
It's fucking insane. I think, I think the property is varying valued at fucking $820, and they want to charge $1,600 a week.
Shit. Yeah, it's bad, and it's only going to stay that bad considering we're still importing records amount of immigrants. So, yeah. Now, the other change that they've got is outlawing rental bidding. Now, apparently, every other jurisdiction in the country had outlawed this practice except for WA. So now, finally, it is outlawed. That doesn't mean...
So 10 years.
Sorry?
And it's 10 years. In 10 years' time, you would have paid the equivalent amount of rent to the total property of the house, price of the house.
Oh, right. So look, rental bidding, that'll obviously mean that you can no longer just advertise a property and say, all right, give me your best offer. But, I mean, we've all heard stories of pulling the real estate agent aside at a home open and then saying, hey, if you give me the place, I'll pay you an extra $30 a week or something like that. So, that'll still happen on a small scale, of course, but, at least they've made it illegal anyway.
Well, no, that's one of the fucking things. I've even seen companies do this over here where they put a property up for rent and then they'll see like they do like a fucking full on like fucking Wall Street style statistical analysis of like, oh, if we're getting this many applicants, that means like we can crank it up, X many more percent, and they'll like relist it for higher and higher rent until they get like, okay, well, this amount of people is basically like the the peak, the aperture of rental price.
Yeah. Now, the other major change that they've made here is that when it comes to like what people call minor renovations, and that can be something as simple as just hanging up a photo or a painting in your house, technically speaking, you're supposed to get permission from the owner or from the landlord to do that. So now when it comes to those minor modifications or renovations, you'll be able to just do that if you want. So, small little tiny wins, I guess you could say, for the renter, but nothing major, unfortunately.
Nope.
Okay, so let's do some Aboriginal news. We're focusing on Victoria here, where, of course, they've got their truth-telling commission that hears all these truthful stories, and not only that, but ideas.
Well, they're not blood libel to you.
Yeah, so dare I say that they're actually making representations at these truth-telling commissions. And what I'm getting at there is that, they don't have a state-level voice in Victoria, and of course we don't have a national Indigenous voice, but it looks like the Truth-Telling Commission is just running as a de facto Indigenous voice in Victoria right now because it's operating in the same way. So here's an example of it. This was a suggestion at the Commission that traditional owners could have the same powers as Parks Victoria to manage public land and claim sites of cultural preservation. Now, claim sites of cultural preservation in the way that Parks Victoria can do that, that sounds a little bit like eminent domain to me. You'd literally be talking about a body of, Aborigines in a so-called corporation who could say, this piece of land is significant to me. Oh, look at that. It's in the public domain. I can just take it. Now, I would assume it wouldn't be quite that free, but but that is basically what they're suggesting here. Now, on top of that, they also made the suggestion that Aboriginal landowners, and here I'm not just talking about traditional custodians over traditional lands of cultural significance. I just mean people who say own a property, like the very rare Aborigine who might own a house and have a mortgage. They're suggesting that they should be completely exempt from land tax. So, basically all those other ways they get you to pay for your house, even when you've paid it off, through things like stamp duty and land tax. They're saying, oh, well, if you're Aboriginal, maybe you should be exempt.
Try to sell it capital gains.
Yeah, well, look, I would actually say, all right, let's do that if we abolish it for everyone. Because, I don't know, is it the old libertarian coming out of me again? But these are forms of taxation that I've always found silly, like land tax and stamp duty. I find it silly. Just like I find payroll tax to just be a joke.
There's one thing that the libertarian is correct on is basically like all these like fucking middling taxes and etc. And then the big ones too have always just shown up to wartime and been marketed as like an emergency thing that they're just going to go away, and then it never fucking goes away.
Yeah. You're talking about hurting sectors of the economy for no reason. It's like we're going to punish employers for hiring people with payroll tax, and we're also going to punish small-time landowners and also just people looking to break into the housing market with all of these ways of inflating the prices through stamp duty and land tax. Again, it's like, what's the point of it? You're doing damage to a sector of the economy and you're getting nothing in return for it. So, if you want to exclude them, fine, but exclude everyone from those kind of things.
Like, again, you'll have, like fucking cluster economics fucking majors who are like, oh, well, like getting rid of that tax will be an inflationary act and etc. And I was like, yeah, no, not fucking really. I fucking hate them when they say that. I want to take a brick and I don't want to speak to them. I just want to take a brick and construct his house.
In Minecraft, of course.
I want to practice traditional European justice.
I'm still all for the enforcement of traditional tribal Aboriginal law. When they say things like spearing juveniles in the leg, instead of just sending them to a diversionary rehabilitation program or something. Like,
I actually genuinely believe like all that heinous shit is actually original culture, considering like the only confirmed like pre-colonial like Aboriginal creation myth is like the fact that the koala was like originally like a woman who was good at dancing and she got fucking sexually assaulted so many times she ran up a tree and turned it into a koala.
Okay.
I'm not joking, that's the story.
Is that why koalas have such high chlamydia rates?
And they don't like being touched? Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay, let's talk about crime. So, they still have not closed the Dondale Youth Detention Centre, the juvenile jail in the Northern Territory. Do you know when it was recommended to be shut down was actually by February 2018. So they're more than 6 years overdue. This was recommended in a royal commission. Now, what this shows, because I got to add that the government said, yeah, we'll do that. We may not meet the February 2018 deadline, but we will close down Dondale. Now, the reason why it hasn't happened is because, well, even the Labor Party has the brains to figure out that you can't shut down one juvenile jail without opening another. In other words, you need to have at least one functioning. Up until this point, the Northern Territory has only ever had one. So what the hell are you supposed to do with all of the detainees once you close it down? The only thing you'll be able to do is set them free. So, that said, the Northern Territory government is saying,
free my freaks.
Before the end of this year, there is going to be a new facility opening in Darwin that has a therapeutic focus. So in other words, it's going to be a total soft-cock jail. That's what it's going to be. And they are just closing Dondale. I don't see why you
Scandinavian-style fuck pens.
Couldn't you just make some minor renovations to Dondale instead? To make it fit that bill? I don't know. But they're now saying, because originally they were actually just going to close it and demolish it. And in fact, government ministers repeatedly referred to Dondale being demolished once it was closed down. Now they're saying they want it to function as a women's prison, as an adult women's prison. So, yeah, that's not surprising. I mean, they did a similar thing here in WA. We used to have 2 juvenile facilities. We had Banksia Hill, which is still running, and we also had Rangeview. Rangeview is now an adult remand prison. So, yeah, it's it makes sense to actually put it to some kind of use once it's cleared out. So, yeah, that's the plan anyway. And, wow, I can't wait to see how much even further out of control youth crime is going to be by the time they transfer them to this therapeutically focused detention center. That'll be interesting indeed.
They don't have rights over fucking KFC.
Call the police when there's a chicken shortage. Okay, I was going to do boring story on Cleveland Dodd, the kid who, supposedly committed suicide. Let's move on to climate and energy instead. All right, so Tanya Plibersek, our environment minister, she has announced that there is going to be a new national environmental protection body. And this is going to be called the Environment Protection Agency, which is actually very, very similar to what they have in America, where they have the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. And, as we know, anyone who's read about the EPA in America knows that they're quite a draconian institution. So we're talking about just a new level of bureaucracy being added to the mix here. The Greens have criticised Labor for not releasing like a wholesale package that where not only do you have a new regulating power, but you've got new laws to go with it and to sort of buttress the powers of that new bureaucracy. So as it stands right now, the EPA would have the power to issue stop work notices, fines, and be able to audit businesses to check their compliance with development approvals. Could enforce other environmental laws such as animal trafficking, recycling, and sea dumping. But all of those actions, though, would simply be based on the current laws. So they're not flagging changes to, say, laws on sea dumping at the moment anyway. And that's why the Greens are saying that this does not go anywhere near far enough. But yeah, wow, I can't wait to see the kind of damage that they do. The stop work orders that they start handing out because of, some very minor non-compliance.
Yes. And then again, who the fuck are they? Like, what type of people are they going to fucking load that institution with?
Yeah, I know. Oh, God.
So I consider myself an environmentalist.
So,
just not the gay kind.
Albo actually did a speech the other day that was sort of setting out the groundwork of the A Future Made in Australia policy, which I described earlier. That speech was actually republished in full in the Australian, surprisingly enough. But I got some kind of a brief breakdown that the Australian provided in terms of what are the policies, the sub-policies of this overall policy of A Future Made in Australia. So on renewables, it's about building solar and wind farms, manufacturing them here, $1 billion investment in the Solar Sunshot program. Resources underwrite almost $1.1 million in loans to grant to build a rare earths mine and refinery in the Northern Territory. Give the Net Zero Economic Authority every tool to support resource communities through economic transactions. Manufacturing, develop advanced manufacturing via the $15 billion National Reconstruction Fund. So that was
going to need a lot more than $15 fucking billion.
Probably.
I'm going to tell you that right now.
Yeah, you probably would. But yeah, that was the area that attracted the most funding. So that is sort of like the flagship of the policy right there. That attempt to kickstart the manufacturing of green energy products in Australia. And also they're looking at public investment and funding to attract private investing and funding in all of those relevant areas of the economy. So yeah. Oh, one other thing, they want to get more Australians in the suburbs and the regions the chance to go to TAFE and gain qualifications to move into green energy. So, as we talked about, being an electric vehicle technician, for example, the equivalent of a mechanic for electric cars. They're really, really trying to kickstart that.
At what point do you just call them a fucking electrician?
Yeah, they pretty much are, even though it is sort of a trade in and of itself.
It's like electrical component, battery, busing cables, and then like finally right at the fucking end, there's like a really stock standard electric motor.
Oh, sure. But I mean, it still requires like, specialized training.
Yeah.
It's a skill, and people would naturally sort of move into it. But of course, we've got a massive shortage because we keep interfering with the market and encouraging the manufacturing of electric vehicles. Even though, what the biggest selling car is in Australia?
I have no.
Do you know
I'll assume it's like a RAV4 or some shit like that.
It's the Ford Ranger. The Ford Ranger.
What?
Yeah, believe it or not, it's the Ford Ranger.
You must have a lot of them over East. I hardly ever fucking see them.
Look, man, I've done my rant about four-wheel drivers. Too many people in the suburbs and the cities get a four-wheel drive and they just don't need one. Basically, if you're not doing regular trips to the country and if you don't go off-road, you don't have any excuse to get a four-wheel drive. Now, that said, I don't want to take away your right to buy one. And you probably piss me off less than when I see a Tesla with a personalized narcissistic number plate.
Tesla license plate that says "I eat cock."
Yeah, but it still definitely shows that people are as hungry for fossil fuel fired vehicles than they ever were. No matter how much we keep wanting to push electric vehicles through fuel efficiency standards and whatnot, why then is the Ford Ranger the biggest selling car in Australia?
Well, I mean, it's not like people say maybe necessarily wouldn't like a Tesla or something like that. And if you've looked at diesel and gas prices recently, you could probably maybe convince yourself that you'd want it. But if you're a dude or even a fucking family man with a dual income, are you really going to drop fucking 20 to 30K extra to get an electric vehicle?
Yeah, it's a hell of a lot of money. And I mean, man, even because I was looking at getting a secondhand car again. I've only ever bought secondhand. I'm not terribly well off, but I was amazed, as compared to the last time I looked for a car, the prices. I'm like, holy shit, man! Even for cars that have done 200,000 Ks, you're still talking about at least 15 grand for one of them. Holy shit, cars have gone.
Can I just get a breaking cringe segment in here? Fucking Syria girl just posted a whole bunch of videos of Gaza, right? And guess what? Her and her fucking big brain decide to chop up in the middle of it.
What?
Catching clips from Katniss Evergreen from Catching Fire. Please take this more seriously and don't fucking combine with Goy Swap Media, please. Oh, fuck.
Oh, man. She likes her cats, doesn't she? Syrian girl.
Yeah, no, it's from Hunger Games, where she's doing you see these rebels, God, I want to talk to President Snow about all this stuff. It's just and it's just photos of people in Gaza being bombed. Why the fuck did you do that?
Yeah. All right. So, okay, next story is boring. Let's move on to Tasmania. We're still on environment.
Tasmania's boring.
Climate and energy right now. Well, look, what's happening in Tasmania? The Australian Labor Party, quite surprisingly, I think they're definitely the most independent of all the state branches of the Labor Party, and the reason why is actually just environmental policy. There's actually for decades been sort of tension between the federal party and the state branch when it comes to range of environmental issues, mainly logging. That would be the big one because, the CFMEU in Tasmania doesn't really represent construction workers there. It represents forestry workers, people who work in logging.
That's what they fucking do.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the Tasmanian economy is driven by that. But then when you had, what's his name? Graham Richardson from the Labor Party. He was the environment minister back in the Hawke government. That was when, Labor started to move to a little bit of a more sort of, so-called environmentally friendly position. And they were more interested in preserving old growth forests and, not building dams and stuff like that, flooding a forest so you can make a dam out of it. That sort of started with them. But the Tasmanian Labor Party was very, very opposed to it. Because, like I said, they're very representative of forestry workers in Tasmania. Like, that's considered to sort of be the blue-collar core of the state. And if you run up against them, well, you're running against your traditional constituents. John Howard even said that when this issue resurfaced in 2004, when you had the election between him and Mark Latham, Latham did like some kind of a deal with the Greens, with Bob Brown, where he wanted to preserve more old-growth forests. The Tasmanian Premier at the time, what was his name? Something Lennon. I forget his first name. Not John Lennon. He was opposed to that as well.
Must kill John Lennon.
And it's very rare that, any sector of the Labor Party actually stands up and says, no, I disagree with that. Because remember, if you cross the floor in the Labor Party, you actually get expelled.
Yep.
Different, obviously, when you talk about state and federal relations. But, yeah, we're actually now seeing this again. So we've got a new Labor leader. Of course, Tasmania just came out of an election. So his name is Dean Winter. He was elected earlier this week. And in his very first interview, after being interviewed at the Weekend Australian, he said that there is no case to reduce stocking levels in the Western Harbour, saying that could cost jobs and devastate those towns and communities. So Tanya Plibersek, of course, the Environment Minister, is considering a rethink of approval for salmon farms in the Macquarie Harbour, and this follows advice of so-called catastrophic impacts on the endangered, I might be saying this wrong, Maugean skate, which is some form of supposedly endangered salmon. So this, we're talking about fisheries, obviously, not about logging. But again, we've got that same sort of argument where it's like the green faction versus the industrial faction of the Labor Party are sort of facing off on this issue. And it's interesting because, still a hell of a lot of the rank and file voters all over Australia, not just in Tasmania, but all over Australia, really, really hate the pandering to the Greens. They consider the Greens and their corollary policies to be just as anathema to Labor values and policy as they do from the Liberal Party. But unfortunately, the Labor Party, particularly federally and in Victoria, just ever drifts ever so slowly in that environmental direction. Tasmania is the only state that holds out in that regard.
Unfortunately.
Yep.
Honestly, okay, that's probably why like a lot of political commentators are saying that Liberal being having its holdout in Tasmania is completely fucked, and I tend to fucking agree. They might
because they do actually get that blue collar vote that used to be a traditional Labor Party vote. The same reason Bill Shorten lost in 2019. Why particularly he did so bad in Queensland. He lost the blue collar vote in Queensland because of Adani and because of that bloody flotilla that Bob Brown led over there. So yeah, you had a bunch of blue collar, staunch Labor supporters who said, what the hell is with all these plans to shut down coal mines and coal-fired gas stations? You're following the lunatic, suicidal policies of the Green Party, so we're actually going to vote Liberal instead. That's what happened.
Yeah, no, by the way, it wasn't I'm sorry, you're wrong there. It wasn't a flotilla. It was Bob Brown's bumming barge.
Yeah, well, it was definitely it was something that came from the inner cities of capital cities in the east of Australia. It did not come from these small towns in Queensland. They were basically invaded by these urban elite hippies who came in trying to tell them that they would just have to suck it up and have Adani shut down and have all of their towns devastated as a result. Okay. So it
Devastated,
was
just
taken
like
up.
Colin is in a suburban elite.
So environmental activists back here in WA have taken it up a notch, and this is concerning the protest against Woodside's Burrup Hab. Tripping over my words here. Burrup Hub gas project.
Aboriginal name.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. Yeah. So yeah, this is a controversial gas project from Woodside that has had environmental activists up in arms from the very beginning. Well, what's the surprise there, though? Now, they've actually targeted the Premier's office in Kwinana, and they used white paint. They painted the walls outside. Let me just open it. I just want to see what these images were. Yeah, so it said block browse on one side of the wall, and then on the right side it said disrupt Burrup Hub in quite large lettering. At least there's nothing like vulgar or profane there for once coming from them.
Surprised they didn't just draw a dick.
Yeah, but look, there are other tactics though have been of that kind. So this isn't the only protest or form of protest that they've been involved in. So this has included blocking CBD traffic. So yeah, that does happen here in Perth as well. Not as much as what it does in Melbourne, but it does happen. Sitting off stink bombs in Woodside's Perth headquarters, and also targeting the home of Meg O'Neill. I think we covered that at the time. You had a bunch of people like harassing her and yelling stuff at her, like as she got in and out of her car going to and from work. And apparently,
activists, I was going to say, hey, activists, you're dealing with Woodside. All you need to do is put a whole bunch of scantily clad twinks on the other side of the office, other side of the road from the office, and nothing will ever get done.
No, and it's just amazing how much they get away with.
Yeah. Well, again,
of,
different levels of
NSN or something when harassing a CEO. What would happen to them,
dude? If we fucking set up a fucking stink bomb in an office, they would accuse us of like planting IEDs.
They would accuse us of gassing. Is what
Yes.
they would fucking do. Of trying to like commit a genocide with a stink bomb. That's what they'd accuse us of doing. All right.
They'd be like, oh god, dangerous levels of hydrogen sulfide were used, a toxic deadly gas. It's like, yeah, you fucking eject it out of your ass every fucking fucking day. Jesus Christ.
All right, so we're just going to go to the States here. Only a couple of stories, though. So we're looking at an election in October for Queensland. I'm still thinking Labor are going to lose this one. And by that time, they would have been in power, I believe, for just over 10 years. So, it's a fair amount of time to be in office. The last Liberal leader, of course, being Campbell Newman, who only served one term. So anyway, apparently they've got some trouble filling seats, getting candidates for particular electorates in the state election, including in seats that they think are winnable. So we're not talking about, safe Labor seats here. Indeed, most of those people are, I believe, just running again, and they're in the ministry. So they're not talking about that, but they're talking about marginal seats that they still have a chance of winning. Apparently, they are short of people, and they have been calling for urgent expressions of interest. So how about that? They're actually fallen over themselves looking for people to run. This is usually a thing that only minor parties have to deal with. Like, because I've gone to like minor party meetings and stuff like that in WA, and I'm not bragging.
Fucking weird.
This is not a humble brag or anything of the kind. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
Oh, you can brag. I do all the time.
Well, like I've been approached, like, and said, do you want to run for state parliament? I've had that happen before, and that is not because I display some great talent to do so. It's because of utter desperation and lack of people actually interested in becoming a candidate. But, you never hear about this happening in the Labor Party or the Liberal Party or the National Party. If anything, there's just always fierce competition to actually get in. So, this is really the first time.
You can brag. It's because you're a fucking decently well put together fucking guy with an authoritative voice. There we go. I'm bragging for you.
I would not. I'm not a people person at all. So.
We're all misanthropes over here.
When it comes to the shaking of hands and meeting people, I would be terrible at all of that stuff. I might be good in other aspects, but that stuff definitely no.
Mr. the 1,000-yard stairs directly into the pint in front of him. Trust me, I've seen that behavior before.
Right. But like in terms of political office, you've definitely got to be a sort of a charismatic people person. That is one of the skills you must bring to the table, or at least if you want to be successful at it, you've got to bring that skill to the table. So yeah, that was interesting. So going to South Australia.
Why? Why would you go to South Australia?
Why would we? Well, this is another quick story. This just caught my eye because there was a ministerial reshuffle, front bench reshuffle of the Labor Party, and this has actually included a former member of the Liberal Party, Dan Craig. So this is a guy who, obviously in the Liberal Party, he then turned independent, and he actually became Speaker of the House in much the same way Peter Slipper did, if we remember that, back in federal Parliament. And, that obviously deals a very big blow to the party you came from in terms of the numbers and the composition of the Parliament. So you could say that he's a traitor, and you could also say that he's being rewarded for his treachery because he's actually made it into the Labor cabinet. And I don't know if this is unprecedented, but I've never, ever heard about this before, about an independent and being from the former, main opposing party, then being brought into your cabinet. It's a very unusual thing to do, but that's what's happened here. And he said that still that, even though he'll be obviously at cabinet meetings and that, he will not sit in the parliamentary room, in the parliamentary Labor Party meetings. And when it comes to the voting on legislation, he will still vote as an independent. He is not being bound to vote with the Labor Party in any way. And he obviously is not a member of the Labor Party either. So he's not bound by those kind of rules. When you cross the floor, you get expelled. He's got no party to be expelled from because he's still an independent. But yeah, very unusual. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is the first time ever that has happened. And just real quickly, the Cook by-election, this was Scott Morrison's seat, of course. Very, very safe blue ribbon seat. They now have a man called Simon Kennedy. Apparently, just an hour after the polls closed in this by-election, he had more than 70% of the vote on his side. So there you go. Obviously, this is not one of those seats under threat by the Teals or something like that. Still very much blue ribbon.
Yeah.
Okay. So, moving on to defense. Actually, we've only got two more stories for you. Richard Marles is set to reveal apparently billions of dollars in program cuts to the Australian Defence Force. Yeah. Well, look, he's unveiling also decade-long investment. So, he's still talking about, large sums of money being spread out over the long term. But in terms of current programs that the ADF is undergoing, he's saying that many of them are no longer fit for purpose and they're going to have their budgets cut. I would agree that there's a hell of a lot of fluff in the ADF that we could just fucking get rid of, like those diversity breakfasts that they have. Why the fuck do they have those? And by the way, one of the good things that the Liberal Party did was when they were in power, I think it was actually what's his name? No, not Christopher Pyne. Whoever the minister was after that abolished them. That was good. And then Labor under Richard Marles brought them back in. So we're going to find out exactly what all of these programs are when the budget is handed down. But I really, really do hope it's that kind of thing, because obviously something like that is not
Christian Porter?
the purpose. What's that?
Was it Christian Porter who succeeded him?
No. Porter was social services minister.
Oh yeah, I keep forgetting these people have like fucking multiple portfolios.
Oh, I'm surprised I can't remember the defense minister's name back then. I really should. Okay, so last story on defense. Oh man, do you remember the Fijian torturer? So this is a guy. His name is he's known as Ben Naliva. His first name is some weird Fijian name, but he was a guy, not a big surprise. We're struggling to get new recruits in the Australian Defence Force, and that's not just at the ground level. We're also talking about senior positions. It's hard to encourage people to want to seek promotion and move through the ranks. So even when it comes to positions like this, we've been looking overseas to fill them. And this was, what was his actual title here? I can't remember. He was a colonel of some description. And it was revealed by The Australian a couple of months ago that he was actually involved in the torturing of political opponents in Fiji. Or you could say advanced interrogation methods is the other name for them. Now, he is still under the employ of the ADF at the moment, but apparently he has also received a taxpayer-funded pay rise on top of his Fiji army salary that he was already getting, and this is to, quote, accommodate the change in cost of living in Australia. Okay? All right, so this guy who was already... He receives a salary from the Fijian government and from the Australian government, has just been given a further pay rise, apparently because of the cost of living prices in Australia. And guess what? The ADF is refusing to reveal just how much that pay rise was.
I guess it could be a fucking war criminal as long as you don't go to the fucking Hague.
This shit just gets worse every time there's a new development. Okay, lastly, Nolsey, what do you think of the prospects of the US actually just dropping all the charges against Julian Assange?
I don't know, man. They can be really fucking spiteful sometimes. It's kind of fucking. It's actually kind of fucking unpredictable how spiteful they'll be to fucking information leakers.
So look, when Joe Biden was just like walking through the gardens of the White House, there was one journalist who yelled out at him, "What do you have to say about the prospects of dropping prosecution of Julian Assange on espionage charges?" And just before he walked off, Biden said, "We're considering it." So that actually, caused the Twitter sphere, etc., to kind of blow up. And Anthony Albanese actually went so far as to say that he is hopeful, more hopeful now than ever, and increasingly optimistic that the US will actually drop its case against Julian Assange. Now, I think that there is a chance.
Okay, so
basically the optics of it. I mean, this has been going on for so long. And so many people just feel so sorry for this guy who has been, effectively in jail for more than 10 years now. And the state of his mental health and physical health and everything, they're just kind of saying, well, hasn't he been punished enough? Even if you do want to punish him in some form, he already has been. So shouldn't you just let him go?
He got some mid-Swedish hooker pussy and only got and it had to go to jail for 10 fucking years. I feel sorry for the guy. No, but
He was set up by an Icelandic turncoat. Like he was like a former supporter of WikiLeaks, and then he was basically paid off to like plant all of this bullshit information on Julian Assange. I don't believe it for a
No, not at all. I think is he's basically harmless now because like he's not going to get a one go back and re-engage with what's left of WikiLeaks. And two, the network that he was with at the time has basically either been like destroyed, black bagged, or is just fucking gone from the face of the earth without explanation. And it'll probably be because for some reason this is like a niche left-leaning issue in America, just because of the last vestiges and really just the lip service at this point of the anti-war movement and the left in America. This could be like one of the things he says, like, oh, look, I didn't do like all the things I promised to do for, the left side of America, but at least I did this. Maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, don't ever think that Julian Assange is your guy. Like, look, I agree, let's get him off. And, if he did deserve to be punished for, say, conspiring with the leakers, like actually actively encouraging them to leak data and information, then, what he's gone through is, I think, more than enough punishment for that. But yeah, the idea that, like, he's some, like, hidden white nationalist or something, no way. He is actually a pretty typical hipster Australian who has very, very strong left-leaning positions. And then just add on top of that, he's just a bit of an internet anarchist, if you will. He just supports all the same stuff that Kim supports. That's really all he is. Loves his hacktivism. Okay. All right, guys. Well, that's where we'll leave it. Apologies again for having a week off. We try not to let it happen, but, life gets in the way. So thank you for listening to episode 214, and we'll see you next week.